Hey, I'm just gonna listen. Yeah, listen. Something big happened this week, okay? And
I know, I already said it.
yeah, shut up. I mean, you're the king of teas. Marvel Comics basically decided that, you know what? Hey, all you longtime fans and friends and loved ones, big middle finger. We're destroying our universe. And we're going to create a whole new exciting universe that you have never seen before.
Wait, you're going to destroy the Marvel Universe? What does that mean, Ryan?
Well, here's the thing. So if you've been reading any of Hickman's New Avengers or Avengers books, you realize that there's been all these incursions going around, where basically you have an Earth from another universe is colliding with an Earth from another universe, and the New Avengers have been going around trying to stop the devastation from happening. But yet they just straight up was like, you know what, we're just going to kill this whole Earth. That way it doesn't destroy ours. And so the New Avengers, are a little secret cabal, we're a bunch of dicks. They're killing billions of people at a time. Avengers my ass. So Marvel decided to run with Hickman's crazy batshit idea of actually having, these different worlds collide and get destroyed, and that is the basis of Marvel's upcoming Secret Wars. They had a big press conference about this at Midtown Comics is it Midtown, New York? Yeah, I think so, in Times Square, where they had this live news feed where you had Tom Brevoort and you had Axel Alonso, the two bigwigs over at Marvel Universe, basically say, look, Secret Wars is happening and this is what's going to happen. The Marvel Universe will never be the same. But this time they feel like they sincerely mean it, because they said they're destroying the universe. It's the end of the Marvel Universe as we know it. And some details came out, and it really looks like it's going to be the Ultimate Universe colliding with the 616 Marvel Universe. And that will be the basis of the new Marvel Universe going forward.
What are your guys' kind of predictions on how stuff rolls out? I mean, we always hear that one of the big two, or big two, specifically Marvel and DC, are going to relaunch, their entire universe. And DC did it with the New 52, right? Sort of, but there's still some holdover stuff where they don't want to cut out all the history that they build up, because they don't want to piss off all these old fans, but they're retconning different things. And what do you think, how do you think Marvel's going to handle that stuff? Are they really going to start from scratch? Because that would be, from an outside perspective, that would be the most welcoming way to do it for new readers. But I could understand that that current readers would be pretty pissed if all of their 30 years worth of history is just kind of out the window, right?
Well, here's the thing: is when DC they did the soft relaunch where some things were continuity and some things weren't, and you can't go soft. It's either shit or get up the can. You gotta go all the way if you're going to do a relaunch. I don't want to see relaunches ever, but. Mm-hmm. These comic companies, they got to shake it up every now and then.
Do you think anybody has had actually a real successful relaunch? Has anybody done it right yet?
Yeah. DC did it back in the 80s with Crisis on Infinite Earths. Mm-hmm. That was really the thing that really set the stage for DC Comics for 20 years. Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, that was a way of DC doing some housekeeping. Was able to take all these crazy Golden Age and Silver Age stories and kind of wrap them up and really start a new universe that was started in the 80s. And I think DC did a good job at that. But there was problems that they had to fix, and after, I should say, post DC Crisis on Infinite Earths, they had to make little tweaks every now and then from 0 Hour to address some of the issues that they had when you do a relaunch and you try to take some things into consideration as continuity, and then you gotta try to sweep under the rug some other things. But for Marvel to do it at this, it's just crazy that the Marvel and the Ultimate Marvel Universe are going to be colliding, and that's going to be the new universe going forward. And the only thing I can think of is if we didn't have Miles Morales being this blockbuster, character find of the century, if he wasn't as successful, I don't think we would be having Marvel crossing over with the Ultimate Universe, because I think this is just a way to get Miles into the Marvel Universe proper.
So it seems like a lot of work for one character.
It does, because besides Miles Morales, I mean, do we really need to have two Reed Richards or two Tony Starks running around? No. But Miles is a character that's unique to the Marvel, or I should say the Ultimate Marvel Universe, that really made a big splash. Now, granted, there's some other great, Ultimate, characters, but I mean, he's the champion of that universe. But yeah, we're getting Secret Wars, and it's weird, I'm not bummed. I'm not upset about it. Look, these companies are all going to do stupid things, and I just hope that if this is a relaunch, and the thing is, they're really being careful with the words that they're saying, where they're not saying this is a full-scale relaunch. They're just saying this is the end of the universe as we know it. I've heard it's not a relaunch, it's a reset. And to me, I don't think that those words are like mutually like exclusive. I think that they could be the same thing. So we're gonna have to see what happens. But for me, I've been through this, man. When DC Comics did their New 52, I got to see the mashup of DC universes and a patchwork of different histories and ideas being thrown around, and now we're living in it. But for Spencer's our Marvel fanboy on the show, and I can only imagine what he's going through right now because I've been through it. Spencer, I've been in the shit.
I don't even know if I can find the words to express how upset I am about all this. No, it's really dumb, and it really comes down to these decisions to fix bad stories. Like going back to One More Day. At one point, they had to have Spider-Man make a deal with the devil to save Aunt May's life, with the price being the annulment of his and Mary Jane's wedding, just so they can have a Peter Parker that's single again, so they can tell stories with a single Peter Parker versus a married Peter Parker, because marriage ages the character. And that all comes down to the whole reason they married him in the first place is because in the newspaper strip that Stan Lee was writing at the time back in the 80s, the newspaper strip, they were like, well, let's marry Spider-Man, because Stan Lee was all about like move forward. I mean, when Stan Lee, in the golden age of Marvel Comics, Stan Lee, like the characters were changing all the time. And that was before they realized these are like viable properties that need to kind of stay in they could change a little bit, but they're technically like in stasis in the fact that you can't have Spider-Man get married. You can't have him have kids because at some point he becomes too old and he needs to stay eternally young, like Casey Kasem or Dick Clark, And so like it's all about, we did this thing 10, 20, 15 years ago that turns out as writers we hate the fact we can't have a story where Spider-Man's on a blind date that he has to find a way out of so he can stop Doc Ock from rampaging through Central Park. And like I said, we had that with One More Day. I'd say maybe 2005, 2006, where you have to go back and retcon it, but you can't just say we're done. They're not married. You can't kill her because the whole women refrigerators. Nobody wants that. You can't have them divorced because that ages them even more. So you have to come up with the way where you editorialize this really awful story where. Instead of just maybe introducing a Miles Morales character in the Marvel Universe, let's have this whole thing where these different universes collide and then all of these worlds are destroyed and the pieces of these worlds come together to form Battle World, and this continent will be the Marvel 616, and this continent will be the X-Men from the TV show, and this continent will be the 2099 characters, and it's just feels like such a stupid band-aid to fix some really dumb stories because everything has to be changing all the time. You can't tell a good story without somebody dying who then 5 years, 10 years later, you're like, oh, maybe Jean Grey shouldn't have died in the whole Planet X storyline that Grant Morrison did way back when. Maybe we can't just bring her back. So how about we'll do this? We'll bring back the teenage Jean Grey. Like it's this weird tail wagging the dog thing, and it's kind of par for the course these days. But it always just feels like a really just a bad way to solve some stupid problem by the fact that 15 years ago, we thought Marvel Comics was this thing with like 40 plus years of history that was really hard for new readers. So we're going to launch Ultimate Comics. And they did, and it was great. And then, Ultimate Comics goes for 10, 15 years. And now that thing has its own problems. It has the very same problem that it was created to fix. But like Ryan said, Miles Morales, the character find of, the past 10, 15 years, probably second only to like Deadpool apparently, and you can't just bring them over. Like you have to have this big thing where you have to have a battle world and stupid press conference and Hot Topic has to be involved, and it's all just really weird. It's really, really, really weird.
Yeah, it was crazy that the day that they announced all this, you had Brian Michael Bendis was on Late Night with Seth Meyers. How crazy is that, man? Mm-hmm. They have like a comic book professional, and he was on there and he was plugging away powers for the first segment. But the second segment was him talking about Secret Wars and Miles Morales, and like, dude, this is on network TV. Look at Bendis. This is crazy. Like, I mean, this is just the beginning, and they're going to really roll out some really aggressive marketing here. And I mean, they're going all in on this one, and it's going to be really interesting. I mean, for me, I'm just sitting back watching and like, what the hell is going to happen? They announced this week that they got 3 titles spinning out of Secret Wars. You had Last Days, which is basically the characters kind of reflecting on their last day on Earth and what would you do on your last day kind of, scenario for our favorite heroes. And then you get the actual battle world where there actually is no more Marvel Universe and everything exists on a patchwork planet. Can you imagine that? You just woke up one day and you're on some battle planet fighting other versions of yourself? Shit would be cray, dog.
I'd probably win against myself.
Yeah, I'd probably bet on like the other Evan Campbell.
The Evan
It's also
Campbell
me,
with like a
so-
mustache and a mohawk, and he's all Mad Max styled.
Yeah. And then the third title we're getting is War Zones, and this is setting up the building blocks on where the Marvel Universe is going. I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but Marvel announced that on Free Comic Book Day they're going to have 2 titles for Free Comic Book Day. Right? That's kind of cool. The first one being Secret Wars 0, and the second title being All New, All Different Avengers. So we're going to kind of see kind of this maybe perhaps a post, Secret Wars Avengers lineup now kind of give us an idea of what the Marvel Universe will look like. In fact, they're being very secretive on who the creative team is. The only thing that they announced is that Charles Soule is on the book, but he's doing a backup feature for Uncanny Inhumans. So that's another way for Marvel to shoehorn in and force down our throats the Inhumans.
The interesting thing about comics today for me is this kind of the reasons that go into some of the decisions, some of you could totally see the politics. I don't know if that's the right word, but you could see the things going on behind the scenes where, for example, in Access, they made the announcement. Spoilers if you haven't read it. It was a pretty awful thing. That's the spoiler. It sucks. Don't. But no, one of the things they retconned that Magneto is the father of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And I mean, this is going back to the beginning of Marvel Comics, to go so far back and say this thing that you've known practically since day one, not true. The reason we're doing this is because Fox owns the rights to X-Men and mutants in terms of film, and we can't get those rights back. But though, due to the fact that they were introduced in the Avengers comic, what was that? No, they were part of the Avengers comic, and some weird loophole in this contract we signed back in the 90s when Marvel was bankrupt. We, Marvel Studios, also have the rights to Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Quicksilver's already shown up in an X-Men film as a mutant, but since Quicksilver's going to be showing up in this new Age of Ultron film, we have to find a new way to a different origin than mutants. Oh, let's go with Inhumans. Oh, okay, so when the Access at the end, we will reveal that they are actually, he's not the father of these two, and eventually, they haven't made this reveal, but at some point, I would be surprised if it wasn't, but at some point, they will be revealed to be Inhumans, and High Evolutionary, who's been linked to their past, will be a part of it, and it's all because of some weird, dumb fight going on between Isaac Perlmutter and, Fox Studios, and it's just ridiculous to think that we are here at the point where these crazy things that have nothing to do with comics at all, that have to do with money and business decisions are pushing this little thing that makes zero money for these corporations at large. Marvel Comics it's great, but it's this idea factory. It's this thing they could totally mine for IP property, but at the end of the day, it's not what Marvel Comics does. It's what we can do with the Marvel comic characters, like the films. And just to see, the retconning of, not retcon, but the addition of the new Nick Fury into the Marvel Universe is all because of the Ultimate Marvel's Nick Fury, who was based off Samuel Jackson, who eventually became the Nick Fury we saw in the film. And since he's the Nick Fury in the film, he's African American. We need to introduce the illegitimate son of Nick Fury, who's a white character who has an African American son, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, they even made him lose an eye.
Yeah, it's really, it's kind of surreal when you look at it that way. And like Ryan said, this is, one of the main things for doing this is to get Miles Morales into the Marvel U by still preserving his history somehow, I guess. And I don't know. And Jean Grey's coming back. I guarantee it. We're going to see Jean Grey. She's going to come back, and that's going to be some crazy thing. The Phoenix Force will show up or something, or who knows.
Right. And it's crazy because, I'm reading Marvel Comics now, and it sounds like we're headed towards a relaunch. And I'm kind of in the same boat as I was a couple years ago when we knew that halfway through Flashpoint that this was going to be the start of a new DC universe. And so you had all these books that were coming out in the DCU, and you're like, none of these stories actually matter anymore because we know that we're headed towards a relaunch. And I'm feeling that now as I'm reading some of my Marvel books. Man, I'm kind of I like this book. I hope this doesn't change. But if they're going in this bold new direction, for colliding histories and universes, the stuff I'm reading doesn't necessarily matter right now. And a story doesn't have to matter to be good.
Sure.
But at the same time, I love continuity, and I love that these characters have these long, histories with one another, and they have pasts, and they bring stuff up, even if it's small and minuscule, they'll bring those up, from a story from 20 years ago that can be brought up now. It still feels relevant and fresh, and I love that about continuity.
Sure.
And I like that characters have a history, and I'm a little bummed. But at the same time, it's like, look, I think it sucks what happened to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Now, I'm not a cheerleader for these characters by any means, but there's always a cool dynamic knowing that their father was Magneto, who's this great, heel in the Marvel universe, and yet they grow up, they started off as bad, but they found redemption, became heroes, and yet they're champions for mutants' rights. And, before there was Uncanny Avengers and a mashup of mutants and Avengers all on one team, you already had that with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. They were mutants on the Avengers, and they were a very public face to the mutant community in comics.
Sure.
To only had that be folded away because a bunch of corporate, Neanderthals are bickering about, well, you can't use the term mutant, and you can't use, character X. It's so fucking lame.
I have a question regarding this stuff specifically. I'm just wondering, specifically about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, right? Just because they can't be Magneto's children anymore, does that mean that the new story has to be bad? Like,
no.
Just because there are all these political influences from the outside of like the actual fictional comic book world, couldn't a writer like pick up the mantle and say like, okay, well maybe Magneto didn't have these children, he has perhaps different children on whatever the X-Men side, or and then from the Avengers side or the Marvel side where you have to introduce these characters. I mean, what if they just made new characters? I mean, I know they lose like that kind of legacy, right, and that history that fans identify with, but couldn't there be a story that is actually good because of this?
Absolutely. And if I'll be the first person to say like, wow, what they did is great. And it's whatever, it's gonna happen. There's nothing I could do about it. Like, I'm with Ryan. That's not the most important thing to me when I think about Marvel Comics, the relationship between Magneto and his kids, but is definitely one of the important things about his character. And what makes him such a great character is that he has this, especially now he's kind of on this path of redemption somewhat, but to sit there and just kind of say, hey, we have this really cool aspect about Magneto, who's probably one of the better villains in superhero comics altogether. Let's take that away from him because of some squabble with Fox Studio over movie rights.
Right.
Like, that's the part that I hate, and if the resulting story, who turns out to be the father, like somebody will be revealed to be the father of the two characters, and whatever, like those are all, I mean, comics, dumb things like this happen all the time. It's just weird when you can kind of see the machinations of corporations infighting and it turning into like a story. And that's a lot of Marvel Comics stories recently. Like the bigger ones they're trying to tell a story. Everyone's always trying to tell a story. These aren't writers who are just doing whatever the corporations say, but at some point they're like, look, we have this, we have the old Nick Fury, he's becoming less relevant, we really have to go with this newer Nick Fury, it's in line with the movies. Jason Aaron wants to do this whole story about the murder of the Watcher on the moon, and in the end of that we will retcon Nick Fury, or not retcon him, but we'll kind of reposition him to be this new Watcher character, and so that way old school Nick Fury that we've all known and loved for 50 plus years, who fought in World War II, remember the greatest generation, will become the Watcher. And it just, like, we get further and further away from what makes Marvel Comics great. What's a great thing about Marvel Comics is there's this bald dude on the moon that watches people and shows up every now and then and goes like, beware, some crazy shit's happening. And everyone goes, oh my God, the bald guy's here, this is insane. And it's this great thing that like Jack Kirby and Stan Lee built together way back in the day. And then here we are today being like, wow, we gotta, this Watcher idea, it's kind of crazy. So we have to kill him, and then we'll install Nick Fury maybe as in his place, and also change his whole history so that way it can kind of line up with where we're going because of the movies. And also knowing that 10, 15 years from now, they're just going to undo it. Like, that's the weird part, is you see these things, these changes are made that they are trying to fix dumb things. Like, we have too many mutants in the Marvel Universe, so we have to have House of M, or the Scarlet Witch will say no more mutants, and that'll retcon the fact there's so many mutants, and there'll only be 200 of them. And then 5 to 10 years, we'll kind of get back to where mutants aren't such a scarce thing. And like, it's just, it's weird. It's weird to where you have to slip in these things. You have to slip in these things because it's all about, comics are growing up. They're I'm used to them just being like guys in tights who fight each other and have, weird things happen to them, and every now and then maybe someone puts out a video game or a trading card set, versus them being these these properties that are making a ton of money.
Yeah, and to answer your question too, Evan, is look, if they make a good Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, story from all this, cool, man, I'll read it, But it's when it's changed for the sake of changing because of corporate shenanigans. That's not how you tell stories, man.
Yeah, definitely not. But the task is gonna fall to somebody to make it work, right?
Sure.
Right, and I'm not gonna prejudge it. I'm not gonna prejudge it, right? And I'll go in there and be like, okay, impress me.
Yeah, it's hard not to, right? Like it's like, how do you erase all of that history and then come up with this new thing? And stuff like that needs time to breathe, right? And it could end up another Star Trek Into Darkness, right?
Right, and that's the last thing we want. That's the last thing we need or want.
Here's the thing, I kind of envy about video games. Nobody has to, when they put out a new Super Mario game, they never have to be like, well, here's how it fits within the last 20 Super Mario games. That second Super Mario game, that didn't really happen, but the third one did. But part of this Mario game is so we could retcon what happened in the 15th Mario game when, he got Mario and Luigi weren't really brothers. Turns out they are actually members of Luigi he's Bowser's illegitimate son.
I mean, that does happen in video games.
It totally does.
There are games that have like a cohesive story.
Yeah, Mario 2 is all a dream, bro.